Hi there. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for taking some time out of your day to attend our 30-minute webinar on pre-budget preparation, 3 top tips. So this is one of a series of webinars we've been holding this year, and today's webinar will be presented to you by Myogen's Angus McGarry. So over to you, Angus.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar hosted by Myogen. My name is Angus McGarry, and today I'm going to be speaking with you about pre-budget preparations and some of the tips that I can give you that will make the process more efficient and your budgeting more valuable to your business in the long term. So just some background on who we are. We are a forecasting, planning and analysis consultancy with offices in Dublin, London and Doha, and our mission for our clients is to enable better decision making. In terms of who we work with companies of all sizes, some of which you may be familiar with, but also we work with smaller companies. And as you can see, we work across a wide variety of industries and build industry-specific models for our client companies. And so the agenda for today's webinar is going to focus on some of the common budgeting problems that you may be familiar with. We're going to focus on how to incorporate drivers on your P&L into your budgeting, the controllable costs that you can pre-populate your budget with to spend your budgeting time more effectively, and then spend that time saved in more of a business partnering role with your different budget stakeholders. By the end of this webinar, we will have learned how to prepare your budget so that it becomes more of a streamlined and collaborative process. And so I'm going to touch on some of the problems of the current budgeting process as outlined here individually, and then touch on some of the practical solutions that you can implement in your organization. As listed, you may be having difficulty preparing a budget that gives a true picture of how your business has been performing to date. Or you may find that the process is a conflictual one that results in finance managers not believing that a division is performing as it should, and with the divisional manager left believing that their finance manager doesn't understand why the figures are the way that they are. Also, accountability and ownership may be something that you feel is lacking or could be improved, as well as transparency and the appropriate user access to information. So much time is spent on the budgeting process that it becomes irrelevant after the time it has been prepared. This is not in line with the current business environment, where decisions need to be made quickly on the most relevant information available. And as you can see, the time spent budgeting can become a 3 to 4 month process and involve 30 to 40% of senior management's time. And then that is largely due down to the issue of budget iterations. And so as you can see, it is the process whereby accounts are transferred and linked across spreadsheets, consolidated, and put into company reports as such. And this is a very inefficient process. The budget should, in terms of accountability and ownership, the budget should carefully designate which departments have authority over and are responsible for which costs. And so because authority and accountability go together, you can only hold individuals and units in an organization accountable for those things that they can control. And so if you don't give subordinates authority to do something, how could you possibly hold them accountable for doing it? And given the organization's goals and strategies, every required task and decision should be under someone's watch. Responsibility accounting allows you to hold subordinates responsible for all tasks over which they have control. And the evidence suggests that only 20% of firms change their budgets within the fiscal cycle. And another survey suggests that 85% of management teams spend less than 1 hour per month discussing strategy. And those figures are from Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. And so in terms of collaboration between stakeholders, the planning process can be an exciting and valuable exercise that can be a major contributor to team building and a means of developing ownership and commitment to a plan. If you involve people, it should end up as our plan and not their plan imposed on us. And so it stands to reason that version management is extremely important in this. And without controls, both delays and costly mistakes will abound. These will include mistakes in initial data capture, budget modeling, consolidation, scenario planning, as well as reporting. And it would help to have a single centralized budget model for the organization, a single repository as such for your model that includes your assumptions. This would eliminate the problem of working from different versions, and there are plenty of budgeting systems available to suit the requirements of companies of any size, which are increasingly cloud-based, which facilitate rapid implementation and decision-making, as well as model changes on the fly. And it stands to reason that when there are many spreadsheets involved in budget preparations, mistakes will be made, which cost the business greatly. And so in terms of aligning budget with strategy, strategy is reviewed constantly by managers. And when they ask questions about market share and profitability 60 months down the line, the numbers that they had budgeted before will have become completely irrelevant. Finance managers need to focus on a small number of variables within their P&L, what their key variables are, and then focus their attention on those numbers and act upon them. Rolling forecasting is the solution to this. If you're focused on the quarterly numbers, then you will want to be involved in rolling forecasting. And so basing your business on cost drivers would be our first tip for your budget preparations. So for example, how much of a difference would it make to you if your divisional manager was able to report to you the exact number of events they were running and what was driving that cost? It could be an increased headcount or a marketing campaign being run. And this would make the budget far easier to accept for finance managers and improve the communication level between different levels. And there is great value to be had from drilling into the data and basing your decisions on the costs that you can control. However, not all enterprise planning and budgeting software supports driver-based budgeting. Driver-based budgeting relies on being able to write rules that cross departments and having models that can be calculated on demand. And currently, this is contrary to the way most enterprise planning and budgeting systems work. Typically, they would work by users downloading a subset of data to their desktop, and once contributors have prepared their submissions, the separate data elements are collected and the model calculated to generate a consolidated result. And this would negate much of the benefits of driver-based budgeting, particularly interdepartment rules. And this brings us back to the old topic of responsibility accounting. By associating relevant costs to budget holders, it gives another level of accountability for finance managers and allows the budget holder to focus on their own strategic choices. If they plan by drivers, it's more related to the future activity of the organization than historic. So one of the clients that we've worked with is DHL. And for them, their budget had become obsolete quite quickly, and they were working from error-prone Excel templates. And as you can imagine, it was a very inefficient and very slow process. And this was a real pain for them. And so their approach was they wanted to focus on agility and use technology where possible, and build the company so that finance were focused on assisting the business and not just number crunching. And the result from their implementation of driver-based budgeting was that the rolling forecasts were based on actuals and their key performance indicators, and that finance validated and interpreted these results. And it resulted in a faster, better, and more unified approach. So for our second tip that we'd give you for your pre-budget preparations, we would say that focusing your divisional budget on controllable costs is very important. So finance managers should pre-populate their divisional budgets with uncontrollable costs, such as the rent associated with keeping staff in an office. And this has become best practice and is a fundamental aspect of driver-based budgeting. And in terms of non-controllable costs, we need to plan our own logic and look from the user outwards and let them focus on things that they can change. A benefit of focusing on controllable costs is that the budget data will be gathered quickly and you'll be able to make quicker decisions on more accurate data. So Ramsay Health Care are another client of ours, and they had a very complex business with a huge Excel-based model and were in high growth. And they moved from cost plus planning to driver-based planning, which resulted in better decision making. So with their complex business model, there was no product or procedure-based model, and as the model was all based on Excel, it was inflexible and error-prone. And their approach was to determine the drivers and connect to market demand that were important to their business. And they had a process for validating the drivers and creating dynamic planning and focusing their efforts better. And so the results for them after this approach was that they can instantly react to changing conditions. They had more relevant information for their decision making, and now the finance team can add value to the business and act as consultants. And so the finance team are reviewing and analyzing data, which is the process they should be involved in, in the business. So for the third tip that we would give you in your pre-budget preparations is to spend time saved on your budgeting process in a business partnering role. So the budgeting process needs to be both a top-down and bottom-up process. As outlined before, bottom-up involves identifying the business drivers that have been historically important and are actionable. The top-down part should be a strategic framing process, especially for identifying the forward-looking factors that could impact operations in the future. So for discussions on this framework to work, we need to keep in mind 3 key principles. One is we need a broad representation of stakeholders that captures the organization's full value chain. And we also need to develop an inclusive environment where participants can speak openly and non-critically about risk and uncertainty. And lastly, we need to ask the hard questions. What could be wrong? What would cause outcomes to be much worse than expected? And so this opportunity to redefine and invest in finance business partnering has been further enhanced by things like the explosion in the quantity and variety of data available, as well as commercial demands of new business models and economic conditions, as well as opportunities presented by the digital transformation. So Etihad Airways, another client of ours, they had many different data sources for their budgeting, and scenario planning for them was difficult and time-consuming. As well as that, there was too much time spent gathering, validating, and reporting their data. And so in Etihad in 2012, the budget was completed by 10 people in the finance department, and then in 2013, it was completed by 300 people worldwide. And each of these planned what was relevant to them, and now do so each quarter happily, and finance and out consultants to the business. So originally, there was no central point where data could be updated easily. Scenario planning was difficult and time-consuming, and it needed a central set of drivers. And too much time was spent gathering, validating, and reporting on data. And so the Etihad approach was to connect all areas of the organization, and assigned plan responsibility meant that people were given their own assigned areas to budget for. And they moved from a cost center to profit center planning. And so they felt a lot more ownership with the budget and when they were working what was relevant to them. And now do so each quarterly and finance our consultants to the business. And so the result was what once took 3 months is now a fluid process. And they can now answer queries and demands from management quickly and efficiently. And they have a far more dynamic and agile organization. So in summary of this webinar, I'm going to give you the 3 tips again. They would be to base your business on your cost drivers, to focus your divisional budgets on the controllable costs within your business, and then spend the time saved business partnering within your organization, especially the finance function. And so if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Just send them to ask@myagen.com. And lastly, put the passion into planning. Thank you very much.